Are you ready, Saeed?
I certainly am.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I believe that it's time to start our second panel. The second panel for today, for the annual conference, will be moderated by no one other than our friend Saeed Arikat. Saeed is a member of the Palestine Center Committee, and we're happy to have him, and the Washington Bureau chief for the Palestine newspaper Al-Quds, a daily for which he is a writer, columnist, and analyst. He previously served as spokesman and director of public information for the United Nations Assistance Mission for Iraq, and currently teaches as an adjunct professor at the American University in Washington, D.C. If you have a TV, you will recognize Saeed, who appears on a daily basis, shedding light on what's going on in the region and around the world, for that matter. It's my pleasure to turn matters over to Saeed.
Thank you, Dr. Eid, and thank you everyone participating with this panel. I'm really thrilled to be moderating this panel. It's always great to be among friends, especially Ali. You know, we have done this before a couple of times. And, you know, this panel was supposed to be, the goal of this panel was to examine Oslo 30th anniversary with a focus on how the Oslo process has shaped the present reality in Palestine. And of course, we know that probably the conditions in Gaza way before, October 7 were really, almost designed and defined by the Oslo Accords that kept Gaza under siege for 16 years and so on. So without, our panelists are Leila Farsakh, who is an associate professor and chair of political science at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. She's the author of Palestinian Labor Migration to Israel, Labor, Land, and Occupation, and has published on questions related to the political economy of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Ali, I don't know what one would say about Ali. There's plenty, but let's keep it short. Ali Abunimah is executive director of the Electronic Intifada, an independent publication focused on Palestine, and is the author of 2 books, One Country and the Battle for Justice in Palestine. We were supposed to have a third panelist, and unfortunately she struck ill last night, so we wish her a speedy recovery, which gives you a little more time. And with that, let's begin with you, Ali. How's that?
Good morning, Saeed, and good morning to everyone at the Palestine Center, to Dr. Eid Mustafa, Dr. Subhi Ali. Thank you, as always, for your stewardship of this important forum that brings us together regularly, and that can never be more important than in these times and in these days when we are witnessing the genocide of our people in Gaza, and also witnessing the heroism of the brave warriors fighting to defend Gaza and defend Palestine from a truly genocidal enemy that has no mercy, neither for children, neither for mothers, neither for fathers, nor for hospitals, nor for ambulances, nor for first responders, nor for mosques or churches, or people of faith, or people of no faith. This is a monstrous, murderous regime, the likes of which would challenge the worst atrocities of history of the 21st and indeed the 20th century. As Saeed mentioned, the theme of this conference is, or was originally, the Oslo Accords, which had their 30th anniversary this year in September. And it might seem beside the point now to talk about Oslo, given the horror that we are witnessing. But I think it's important to consider how Oslo fits into the picture we're seeing now. And I want to start from the more recent events. Earlier this week, Herzi Halevi, the chief of the Israeli army, the commander-in-chief of the genocide that is going on now, praised the Palestinian Authority for its continued collaboration with Israeli occupation forces in the West Bank. As summarized by Haaretz, Halevi said, quote, that the PA has been working in recent weeks to prevent demonstrations and marches in support of Hamas and its massacre. Of course, it's Haaretz or Halevi's words calling what Hamas did a massacre. I might have more to say about that later, but that's not what I want to address now. Halevi was speaking with Israeli lawmakers at Hakiria, which is the name for the Israeli military base that is in the heart of a civilian area of Tel Aviv, since we're always told that Palestinians like to place their military installations among civilians. Israel's main military compound is right in the heart of Tel Aviv. He was speaking to lawmakers there who challenged him and by saying that the Israeli army has not been brutal enough against Palestinians in the West Bank in recent weeks, and who also warned him that the PA, the Palestinian Authority, was about to change sides and start fighting with Israel in solidarity with Hamas. And Halevi replied that he did not see any information in the Israeli intelligence to support this, and he noted, quote, that the PA works every day to prevent demonstrations in support of Hamas, first and foremost because of the interests of the PA itself. Now, this, of course, was the Israeli Army Chief Gallant, but on November 1st, so not so long ago, I'm sorry, Herzi Halevi, but on November 1st, Yoav Gallant, the Israeli Minister of Defense, publicly called for tax revenues that Israel collects on behalf of the PA, this is one of the arrangements of the Oslo Accords, to be turned over to Ramallah. And this is because the Israeli finance minister, the Bezalel Smotrich, was refusing to turn the money over. And Gallant called publicly for Smotrich to turn the money over to Ramallah, saying, quote, the state of Israel is interested in maintaining stability in Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria is the fake biblical name Israel gives to the occupied West Bank. The state of Israel is interested in maintaining stability in Judea and Samaria, always and especially during these times, Gallant said, and I continue quoting, the funds should be transferred immediately so that they may be used by the operational mechanism of the Palestinian Authority and by the sectors of the Palestinian Authority that are dealing with the prevention of terrorism. Of course, we know, that's the end of the quote, of course we know that Israel refers to any sort of protest or resistance to its military dictatorship over Palestinians, even unarmed protest and boycotts and human rights advocacy, as we just heard from Shawan Jabarin of Al-Haq, the most venerable and respected Palestinian human rights organization that has been branded a terrorist organization by the monstrous regime in Tel Aviv. So, of course, when Gallant says the PA is fighting terrorism, he means it's fighting also people like Nizar Banat, who was brutally tortured and murdered by the Ramallah regime. Of course, none of this is new. As recently as July, Benjamin Netanyahu said, I quote, We need the Palestinian Authority. We cannot allow it to collapse. And he added, it does our job for us. Herzi Halevi, in his comments a few days ago, the Israeli army chief, also pointed out, according to Haaretz, that, quote, the United States has an interest in maintaining quiet in the West Bank and not harming the PA at this stage. And of course, we're aware of why that's the case. I mean, it's the case all the time. But on Wednesday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, or as I like to call him, the angel of death, there's just something about him when I see images of him. He always looks like he would be the last face you see before you. Anyway, that's what he reminds me of. He said he suggested on Wednesday that following what Israel and Washington hope will be the defeat of the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, the Palestinian Authority could be brought in to rule the smoking rubble in Gaza on behalf of the Israeli regime that is currently committing genocide there. And far from rule this out, Abbas appears to be quite willing, Mahmoud Abbas, which is undoubtedly why his security forces are doing all they can now to help repress any resistance in the West Bank to the genocide in Gaza. And the New York Times revealed yesterday that Hussein al-Sheikh, the Secretary General of the Palestine Liberation Organization, what has now become for some years the Palestine Liquidation Organization, said this week that the PA is open to helping administer Gaza, but that it wants, quote, a serious American initiative to advance the so-called two-state solution. This current administration is capable of doing that, al-Sheikh added, according to the New York Times. It ought to be shocking that the Palestinian Authority and the so-called PLO would continue to flatter and appeal and prostrate themselves before Washington, before the likes of Secretary Blinken, while Joe Biden and Blinken are sending plane loads every single day of bombs that will fragment into thousands of pieces, tearing apart the bodies of babies, of children, of mothers, of doctors, of the elderly, of our grandparents, of Nakba survivors, that he would be appealing to this Washington administration that is murdering our people to launch an initiative for a two-state solution, and to say that Washington is capable of this. This is appalling. It's disgusting. And I think it's this kind of thing which explains the utter revulsion that every Palestinian I've ever met in my life feels towards the regime in Ramallah. Now, as I noted, none of this is new. In September, as recently as September, the Israeli and Palestinian media reported that the United States, with, of course, the approval of Israel, transferred arms to the Palestinian Authority via Jordan to fight against the Palestinian resistance. Around that time, there was an open letter signed by a number of Palestinian academics and intellectuals and others, some of whom are my friends and people I have great respect for, at that time condemning the comments Mahmoud Abbas made about the Holocaust. I'm not going to address that. But in the letter, they accused the PA of, quote, increasingly authoritarian and draconian rule, which disproportionately impacts those living under occupation. I highlight this because, in a sense, this is a revisionist history which tries to paint the Palestinian Authority as having become authoritarian, as having become a tool of the enemy, of the occupier. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves and remind others and to affirm that the Palestinian Authority was created from the very start as a tool of the occupier, as a tool of the oppressor, as a weapon to be used against the Palestinian people and their just struggle. And this is something which the Palestinian Authority, under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, began to do immediately when it entered Gaza in 1994. In that year, the moment the Palestinian Authority arrived in Gaza, remember, this is ancient history now to many, but they started in Gaza and then in Jericho, and then they spread to other little islands around the West Bank where they've remained since then. In 1994, the PA began using lethal torture against Palestinians, and in one early horrifying incident, the Palestinian Authority murdered 13 Palestinians protesting against its rule. So from the very beginning, this has been the Palestinian Authority. Now, this is the point I want to come to. We all know this at some level. We all understand it. And many of us often criticize the Palestinian Authority for collaboration, for security coordination, for complicity with the occupation, for serving the occupation. We use all sorts of words and euphemisms, and I include myself in that. The one word we tend to avoid because it's a painful word, but I am going to use it, and I think we should use it, is treason. These are traitors. What they're doing is high treason of the highest order, that in any wartime situation or situation of occupation would be punished as the most serious crime anyone can commit against their people. These are traitors, and what they're doing is treason. And we need to get over the taboo of saying it. I know it's painful because it conjures up all sorts of painful images: civil war, intra-Palestinian conflict. We all want unity. We all want reconciliation. It's painful to be divided. But there can't be reconciliation and there can't be unity with traitors who are helping an enemy occupier that is committing genocide against our people. The Jews who helped the Nazis are rightly reviled. They're called capos. And Palestinians who assist the genocidal regime that has murdered now almost 5,000 children in the space of a month, more children killed in Gaza in a month than in all armed conflicts all around the world for years. These are traitors, and we have to say it. And so what is the logical conclusion here? We can't shy away from the logical conclusion, which is that our brothers and sisters in the West Bank have the responsibility to bring it down. It's not protecting them. The idea that the Palestinian Authority somehow brings stability and security to the people in the West Bank is utterly false. Since October 7th, the occupier, with the support and backing of the Palestinian Authority, has committed massacres in the West Bank. Yesterday, they murdered 10 people in Jenin. Since October 7th, they've killed more than 150 people, including 44 children in the West Bank. These are enormous numbers that are pale, that aren't getting attention simply because of the scale of the genocide and the extermination campaign in Gaza. This has already, in 2023, been the bloodiest year in the West Bank since the UN began keeping records in 2005, but possibly since much longer. So it is the responsibility of Palestinians in the West Bank to bring down this unelected, illegal so-called government that has been placed by Israel and the United States in charge of killing and jailing Palestinians. And any revolutionary action on the part of Palestinians to bring down these traitors in the West Bank should be seen as legitimate self-defense by the Palestinian people. In Washington, it is normal to call for the overthrow of this or that regime. This leader must go, that leader must go. We should arm these people to bring down this leader. We should arm that group to bring down this government we don't like. That's the constant refrain from the psychopathic and genocidal imperialists in the White House and the State Department. So we can say, in line with the hallowed American tradition, it's time for us to say that the so-called Palestinian Authority must go, and only Palestinians can remove it. As I said, removing this illegal, oppressive, collaborator regime from power is entirely within the realm of democratic and legal action, and is also self-defense against the Zionist killers whose rampages through the West Bank are only escalating. And that includes not just the army, but also the hordes of Jewish supremacist settlers. It's also important at this time to say this because of the American hope or plan to bring these traitors back to Gaza to rule over the rubble and over the stench of the bodies that cannot be recovered from under the rubble, to bring the PA back, to add more injury to the people in Gaza. I'll just conclude by saying the end of the PA traitor regime will bring down a key pillar of genocidal Zionism and be an important step towards the liberation of Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for that compelling presentation, as usual. And just, on the figures, because as Shahwan Jabreen reminded us, 20 people were killed yesterday in Jenin. The number now is at about 183 since October 7th in the West Bank, just for the figures. I also missed some information in Leila's biography, so let me just repeat it, if you allow me, if you indulge me. Leila is a professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. She's the editor of Rethinking Statehood in Palestine, Self-Determination and Decolonization Beyond Palestine, University of California Press, 2021, an author of Palestinian Labor Migration to Israel, Labor, Land, and Occupation, London, Routledge, second edition, 2012. She's also the co-editor of the Arab-Jewish Question, Geographies of Engagement in Palestine and Beyond, Columbia University, 2020. She has published widely on the political economy of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and alternative to partition, alternatives to partition in Israel, Palestine, in various academic journals and other venues, including the London Review of Books, Le Monde Diplomatique, Al Shabaka, Jadaliya, The New Arab, and others. Without further ado, Leila, please go on.
Thank you very much for your kind words. You didn't need to repeat my introduction, but I appreciate it. Thank you also for the Jerusalem Fund for organizing this very important and timely conference. And for all the participants, I couldn't hear what was in the first panel, unfortunately, but I just caught the last end of it. And I also want to thank Ali for his excellent intervention and pointing out to the challenge and the problem that the Palestinian Authority represent to the Palestinian cause. And I agree with it. There is they can be it is treason what they're doing, and something needs to be done about it. But we are in a very difficult situation, as we all know right now. What I wanted to do, actually, given that this conference was about the Oslo peace process and how we came to this, I thought that maybe we should do a quick revision of what the Oslo peace process is about, just because that can help us to understand where we are today and why we have this PA, which is a treason that is actually harming the Palestinian cause, not defending the Palestinian cause, is actually compromising the Palestinian cause and has contributed to the situation we are in. So if you bear with me, what I will do a quick revision of Oslo, and I will share a PowerPoint, maybe because I'm an academic, but also because I want to show some maps that maybe your viewers, given that it's 30 years, forgot where we were and how we reached this point. So as you all know, Oslo is basically two agreements. They were signed 30 years ago. The one is the Declaration of Principles in 1993, and the second one is the interim agreement. And what the intention of Oslo was never to resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict. It was about managing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict according to Israeli priority, not to Palestinian, according to Palestinian rights. But it's important to remember that they were really made of they defined the framework for negotiation between Israel and the PLO. And this framework included two main things in my view. One is the exchange of mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO. Now, for many of you, this might sound, it was stupid, this was the bare minimum, what is there to think about it? But I think if you remember, some of us do remember, in 1993, when Yasser Arafat and Rabin went to the White House alone and signed the Declaration of Principle, Rabin at the time, who was the Prime Minister of Israel, the general who called to break the arms of the Palestinians during the first Intifada, made a speech in which he said, for the first time, he provided the first official Israeli recognition of the PLO and the Palestinians. You have to be aware that before 1993, ever since the Balfour Declaration, the Zionist establishment in Palestine before the creation of the State of Israel, and after the creation of the State of Israel, Israel has always insisted there is no such thing as Palestinians. They are Arabs. These people are to be resolved. Their problem, the indigenous people there, it's a humanitarian problem, not a political problem. And UN Resolution 242, that is the basis of every peace accord ever since the 1967 war, also refers to the Palestinians, does not refer to them by name, and call about them as refugees in need of a humanitarian solution. So Israel and the PLO, of course, rejected that. PLO always said, the Palestinian people are a people with the right to self-determination. This was confirmed internationally in 1974. But Israel's policy has always been to destroy the PLO. And for those of us who remember, this moment was happening, the genocide that's happening in Gaza, for many of us reminds us of 1982. 1982, when Israel went into Lebanon to destroy the PLO, who at the time was defined as a terrorist organization. It put Beirut under siege for 88 days, where people had no water, no electricity. So Israeli and Zionist onslaught on the Palestinians has been relentless, as we all know. So to come, despite all this onslaught, and in 1993, to come and finally provide an official Israeli recognition of the Palestinian people, and in Yitzhak Rabin's words, he said at that speech in 1993 that Israelis and Palestinians, and I'm quoting here, are destined to live together on the same soil in the same land. This important recognition that basically the Palestinians the Palestinian people exist, that Israel has to share the land with the Palestinians, has been a very important and a game changer, but it was very, very costly for the Palestinians, because the price of achieving this Israeli recognition of the existence of the Palestinian people and having to negotiate with the Palestinian people. And the Palestinians are not vanishing, they're not disappearing, they're not going anywhere. They're here, they're staying on their land, and we see it again today while a genocide is taking place on the Palestinian people. The price that the Palestinians paid for this recognition is very high, because as you all know, the price for this recognition was to create an apartheid, to consolidate an apartheid reality in the West Bank and Gaza. Oslo was not about resolving the conflict. Oslo was about managing the conflict with the creation, as Ali nicely pointed out, the creation of a Palestinian Authority to whom the Israeli army and the Israeli state subcontracts the responsibility of managing, controlling, and what many would also argue, dissolving the Palestinian population. So what are the features of this apartheid reality that Israel consolidated with Oslo? As you know, it divided the West Bank and Gaza into area A, B, and C. This is a map of Oslo. You see the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The red areas are the areas which are area A, where Palestinian Authority has control over the Palestinian population and 20% of the land. Area C, which is these white areas that you see on this map, in which Palestinian Authority is responsible for the population. So again, the responsibility of the Palestinian Authority is administrative, not political, which is typical Bantustan structure. And then you have area C, which is all this white area that you see here, in which Israel has full control over the security and the population in this area. What also did by 1999, had the Palestinian Authority elected democratically in 1996, having what we call functional jurisdiction over 93% of the Palestinian population, but having control over only 20% of the Palestinian areas in the West Bank and Gaza. Now, of course, since 2000, you know that there was supposed to be a Camp David agreement or negotiation in 2000 to deal with the final status issues. The final status issues collapsed because we don't need to go into it. But what matters, this also led to the Aqsa Intifada in 2000. And the Aqsa Intifada saw an acceleration of Israeli settlements and Israeli settlers, the building of the separation barrier, 703 kilometers of separation wall, apartheid wall, what we call, 500 kilometers of bypass roads. Here you see the wall, the lines of the wall. It's taking 10% of the West Bank land, which you see here. It's encroaching inside the West Bank to incorporate the settlements. Israel developed further its checkpoint policy that fragment the Palestinian areas into vaguely 8 Bantustans, which are around the Palestinian areas like Hebron, Bethlehem, Ramallah, Nablus, Jenin, Qalqilia, and Tulkarem. Okay, and basically confirmed what you see right here, which is the area where Palestinian lives. You can see it, how it is fragmented territorially and cut by checkpoints. These red lines are the lines, the roads that Palestinians can use. And the blue lines are the lines, the bypass roads, which connect the settlements, the 130 settlements with inside Israel. And the yellow points that you see here are the major checkpoints, which are becoming terminals where Palestinians cannot exit without Israeli permission. So this is why what we see is the creation of a Bantustan reality, which is the essence of apartheid and the essence of what we have over the past 30 years. Palestinian locked, or what people also call now the Gazification of the West Bank. Palestinian population reserves in the West Bank, fragmented from one another, regulated by checkpoints and Israeli permits. This graph shows you the expansion of settlers' population over the past 30 years. And I chose to put it from 1972 to 2021 so that you can see where the most expansion of settlements and settler population happened in the so-called peace process. By 1990, we had a total of 210,000 settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This is more than tripled in the 30 years of peace process. We have today 730,000 settlers in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. They are now 18% of the population in the West Bank. They make any viable two-state solution, which the international community has supported with the roadmap in 2003, impossible and a farce, because as I showed you in the map up before, you see how they are in all areas of the Palestinians here again. These are all settlements that cut through. And since 2005, we have Gaza representing the siege on Gaza, which representing the largest, one of the largest Bantustans and more concentrated Bantustans, in which 2.3 million Palestinians have been living under siege for 17 years, having an unemployment rate of over 47% for the past 17 years, poverty rates of 80%, electricity only 12 hours a day, and dire situation, which was catastrophic even before what happened after October 7th. So this reality of apartheid that has been consolidated and has been sowed with Oslo, has been consolidated with Oslo, and has put us in a situation that we find ourselves today, a situation in which we have a collaborative, a compromised Palestinian Authority whose focus is on the survival of the authority, not on defending Palestinian rights. But we've also seen that we have a resistance movement in Gaza and actually a resistance that is determined to emphasize Palestinian rights and emphasize two very important things, which we've seen today and why we are today. Basically, that the Palestinians are, again, is a political question. We Palestinians have political rights that we are fighting for. That Gaza is not a humanitarian crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis, but it is fundamentally a political issue. That Gaza represents today all the Palestinian people, rather than be the forgotten area that nobody talked about and just talks about in the Western media as a humanitarian crisis that we need to resolve. But it is also true that today, as a result of Oslo, that criminalized Palestinian resistance, that fragmented Palestinians into an apartheid reality, that has led to a Palestinian Authority which is delegitimized and beefed up and sustained by Israel and the Americans. We find ourselves at a juncture of how we're going to continue today, because we are witnessing a genocide like we've never seen before. We're witnessing another Nakba under our eyes, which I know for each one of us is incredibly hard to bear. We don't know where the situation is going to go, apart from two things which I think is very important. One is that today, the land that Israel controls from the river to the sea, it has only one sovereign power, which is Israel. Israel is a settler colonial state controlling a total population of 14 million. 7 million of these 14 million that Israel controls are Jewish Israelis that have political rights and are feeling very scared, rightly so. And 7 million Palestinians that are fragmented territorially, legally, and politically. We have 2 million inside Israel who are being penalized, ostracized, attacked, and we don't hear anything about it, silenced like never before, taken to court like never before. The onslaught on the Palestinians and citizens of Israel is massive, and it is not well reported or talked about enough. We have 2.3 million Palestinians in the West Bank, and as you know, and as I showed, they're fragmented into Bantustans. The Palestinian Authority is, so to speak, responsible for their security or for preventing that they rebel and join their brethren in Gaza. We have the 350,000 in Jerusalem. They're also under assault, facing house demolition, threat of expulsion. And we have 2.3 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, 1.3 of them being forced and deported into the south of the Gaza Strip, and we know the plans to try to expel them outside. Now, this situation we find ourselves today. We started with Oslo recognizing the Palestinian finally, and deciding that this recognition of the Palestinians is a way to dissolve the Palestinian question rather than resolve it. 30 years later, we find that the Palestinians are still on their land, are still determined to fight for their independence, are still determined to say we have rights and Palestine belongs to all those who live in it. And the Palestinian right of return is a right that for everybody, that the Palestinians not go anywhere. We don't know what the next step is going to be because the assault on the Palestinians also globally by governments, especially the US. I mean, the US is aligned with Israel in wanting to dissolve the Palestinian question, but I think they're quite aware that they need a political solution. Now, the political solution that they are offering is a two-state solution, but as Ali already explained, this is no longer possible given that the PA is a collaborator regime, is a traitor regime, and given also that Israel destroyed the two-state solution with its construction of settlement and the expansion of settlers. And we are de facto in an apartheid reality for the past 30 years, and the only answer for a apartheid reality is a one state in which everybody lives in equality and peace. Nobody is yet talking in those terms, but that's what we need to push for, the fact that the partition paradigm and the two-state solution is dead, and we need to think of something different. Thank you. I'll stop here and we'll take questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila, for this amazing presentation, so informative. I want to remind the listeners that if you have a question during the conference, don't hesitate to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Before we go to the audience, I have a couple of questions to Ali and to Leila. Ali, I want to ask you on how the impact of October 7, which really, in reality, the first time that Palestinians have been able to go into occupied 1948 and fight the Israeli army and inflict damage upon the Israeli army. How will that play into the psyche of the Palestinians going forward? And to Leila, if I may, I put the two questions together. And we all talked about, and Ali can chime in on this too. I remember in 1982, my wife sitting right next to me. She was there in the siege of Beirut for all 88 days. So we remember how, this and then the Intifada basically led to Oslo. Basically led to Oslo. The PLO, went in and tried to cash it in, basically, and they did. I mean, we went to Madrid, then to Oslo, and so on. And my fear to both of you really is, can this truncated, whatever it is. I mean, I don't know how to describe it really, the PA. Can they take advantage of this heroic, I mean, of course, the suffering, the blood, the destruction, and all this, but also this heroic resistance that is really inflicting a great deal of damage and basically destroyed the image of the Israeli army, and then go and cash it in. How do you feel?
Well, thank you, Saeed. Of course, it destroyed the image of the Israeli army that we were all brought up with, that the Israeli army is invincible, that it's all-powerful. It turned out to be a paper army, just like many of the other armies of the regimes in the neighborhood. And I think this is an opportunity also to point out that because what the resistance organized was a very effective military operation, targeting the Israeli military in its bases, in Erez, in Nahal Oz, in Ofakim, in all of these settlements around Gaza. And it was a carefully executed military operation targeting the military, for the most part, that Israel had to try to cover up its complete failure and defeat by putting about these lies, these propaganda atrocity stories about dozens of beheaded Jewish babies, and they even invented a story about a baby was cooked in an oven. And that that Hamas burned people in their houses and they burned people in cars. Of course, that never made sense to anyone who could see the images, because how could fighters carrying Kalashnikovs or perhaps a few hand grenades have caused the massive destruction that was seen in the images from the colonial settlements around Gaza? Of course, I'm not saying that no Israeli civilians were killed by Palestinian fighters. It's possible and even likely some were killed by Palestinian fighters. But as Saleh al-Aruri, the deputy head of Hamas, said, it wasn't the plan to target civilians and kill them. And indeed, that is confirmed by many Israeli sources. I'm going to share the screen if I may. This story that we is that visible now? Yeah, this story that we published at the Electronic Intifada, which was an interview with Yasmin Porat, an Israeli who survived the massacre at Kibbutz Be'eri. And when I say massacre, the massacre was done by the Israeli army, who went in and indiscriminately shelled the Israeli, the kibbutz houses, regardless of who was in them, killing Palestinians, killing Israeli civilians. And she says it on the radio. We have the whole interview here in Hebrew with English subtitles, and we also have at the bottom the complete transcript of the interview. And the army, and in it, Yasmin Porat says that indeed, most of the people in the kibbutz were killed by the crossfire. And we have also seen testimony from Israeli helicopter pilots who said that on that first day of October 7th, they were simply firing indiscriminately from the helicopters. And indeed, we have survivor accounts of Israelis who said, we were in a car with Palestinians and the Apache helicopters just came and started shooting everyone. So the point of this is that Israel saw a great danger in its own people and the world understanding that they had been militarily defeated on October 7th, an historic, astonishing accomplishment by the resistance. A major military defeat of an army that is supposedly the most sophisticated and backed by the United States and all of Europe. And they defeated it. They understood it. They studied it. They learned its weaknesses, and they defeated it, which is why they had to have this massive propaganda campaign that these are terrorists. They just came to kill Jews. They came to behead babies. They came to do all these atrocities, which Israel has provided no proof or verification for. And in fact, many of them turned out to be lies. So the danger to Israel is not just the guns of the resistance and the skill of the resistance and destroying its tanks, as we see every day with the Yasin 105 homemade missiles, or with the Cornet missiles, but it's psychological. When the people of the region understand that this regime is a paper regime, that without the United States it would collapse, they will say to their leaders, so-called leaders, why are you groveling to this regime? Why are you normalizing with this regime? This settler colony is temporary, like the apartheid regime in South Africa, like the French colonial regime in Algeria. It doesn't belong here. It can't stay here. Now, when I say that, I'm clear. My position is always clear in a position of principle, that the settlers who are there now, who are born there generation after generation, are welcome to stay as equal citizens living under the law, but not as settlers, not as people with racial privileges. You know, someone commented to me the other day on social media. I was pointing out the hatred the hatred the Israelis have for us. They hate us, genocidal hatred. And someone pointed out, and it struck me, he said, I was saying that the hatred they generate in us is generated by their deeds. And someone said, and even with all of that, we don't hate them as much as they hate us. We want them gone. We want them to stop oppressing us. We want them to stop murdering us, but we don't want to see their children slaughtered. I never met a Palestinian who says, I want to see the children of Israelis suffering and slaughtered. We don't. They do. They revel. They share on TikTok, on Instagram, on social media. They mock Palestinian children who don't have food, who are being dehydrated because the water. They take glee in it. But despite that, if there are some settlers who, after Zionism is over, after Israel is removed from our region, wish to stay and live as equal citizens, ahla sahla, as we say, ahla sahla. But what this murderous campaign, this genocide, was intended in the minds of the Zionists, that we have to teach those Arabs that we are here to stay, and that if they decide to rise up against us or to rebel, we will make them pay such a high price that they will not rebel for another 100 years. But these idiot colonialists don't understand that the message that every Palestinian, even the Palestinians emerging from the rubble of their homes in Gaza, take is this entity has to go. It has no future here. And its end is closer than ever. And this is the conviction that they can never erase. And this is the conviction that the accomplishment of October 7 reinforced in everyone's heart and mind.
Thank you, Ali. And we have plenty of time. I have a lot of questions. So from the audience, but I want to go to Leila and
cashing
respond
in
to my question. Yes.
Yeah. So will the PA cash in this incredible watershed moment? What Hamas did on October 7th has been a watershed moment, and it's as important as what happened in 73. It's we are still living it, right? We don't know what the end result is going to be, but we are in a watershed moment because, as Ali explained very nicely and very clearly, that this is an expression of Palestinian resistance, of determination that they have a right to life and to freedom and to their land, and that Israel is a Zionist state that is determined on eliminating the Palestinian and failed to eliminate the Palestinian. Now, the problem is, how will the PA use this or not? Given that the PA is a collaborative regime, it will not be able to cash this in a viable way, in a way that can benefit the Palestinian cause. Okay, that's a fact. That's a given. I think that, you see some PA officials, especially the ambassadors, be doing some good job in emphasizing this is about Palestine, not just about Gaza. It's about Palestinian rights. It's about freedom. But if we don't talk about the PA of Mahmoud Abbas and Hussein al-Sheikh, these are people who want to squash the resistance, not empower the resistance, and they want to cash this in a two-state solution, which, as we already explained, is already dead. Everybody knows it's dead. The problem is, while everybody knows that the two-state solution is dead, we don't have a political platform for a one-state solution. So what's going to determine the outcome is not just the Palestinian Authority position, which so far has been the unity of the Palestinian people. We don't want another Nakba, but they're all lip services, okay? It's going to be how much Hamas holds up in Gaza, and also the role of the regional leaders. We haven't had a chance to talk about the regional configuration, but the regional configuration is very, very important. The role of Qatar, the role of Saudi Arabia, the role of Iran, the role of Hezbollah, the role of Egypt, all that matters. And we know now they're doing lots of back channels discussion. You evoked 1982. If you remember 1982, the PLO was forced out of Beirut, went all the way to Tunis. If you remember well, there was also the split of the PLO in 83 between those with Arafat and against Arafat. And yet the PLO survived that horrible storm, okay? And as you said, 5 years after that, we had the first Intifada, and after the first Intifada, we had the Oslo Agreement. Look, for whatever it is, I mean, we have to see things historically, in historical terms, and see where we're going. The Palestinian people with the PLO paid a very heavy price, as I explained, by receiving Israeli recognition of their right to exist and the fact that this land is to be shared with the Israelis. Palestinians did the historical step of accepting the two-state solution, of accepting to create a state on 22% of historic Palestine. But what became clear, that Israel could not even accept this Palestinian capitulation, because Israel is determined on eliminating the Palestinian question. And what is to the advantage of the Palestinian right now is to say, we tried the two-state solution. We tried surrender with you. We accepted everything you wanted, and you still did not create a two-state solution. But guess what? We tried this chapter. It failed because you made it fail. Israel made it fail. You killed the two-state solution, not the Palestinians. We were so willing to compromise on everything. And despite all what we compromised on, we even Hamas accepted siege for 16 years. Like, what more do you want more than that? And you still did not get a two-state. We still had more settlements. We still have more violations. So now we are at a turning point. The two-state solution was tried, did not happen because Israel has eliminated it. Israel now is adamant and determined to eliminate the Palestinian with the genocide. But guess what? There's still 7 million Palestinians inside Palestine. Even if they expel 500,000 or 1 million, what would they do with the rest? We are here to stay. We're not going anywhere. So I think what we're going to see over the next few years is how Hamas and the PA and the region will try to capitalize on this. For the short run, unfortunately, it will be in how we provide humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians. But the larger question remains, how will you manage this apartheid? Maybe you'll manage this apartheid for another 5 years, 10 years, but it will not last forever, because Palestinians have shown the determination to stay no matter what. And this is, this is the biggest challenge for Israel, because it has to go. But here, if you allow me, because I saw one of the questions talking about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which is something that we here in the US, we're already seen it. This is the attack, because I always say the United States is another front in this war. There's the front in Gaza, there's the front in the West Bank, there's the front inside 48, but the US, for good or for worse, we are also in a front as all Palestinians. This is another part of the war. And the war here is being waged on the fact of silencing the Palestinians and rolling back all the success we had over the past 30 years in pushing for our narratives, in legitimizing our story, in having much more space than we ever had 30 years ago. And many of you here know that. We don't only have one Edward Said like 30 years ago. We have much more of them. We have speakers everywhere. We have people, members of Congress. We have lawyers who are very articulate. We are here and everybody knows our story. The Israeli establishment now is adamant on rolling back this position, this space that we acquired. And they are trying to do it by delegitimizing and accusing any critique of Israel as anti-Semitism. And here what I would say is something very important. Israel is a state that got created because the British gave them the Balfour Declaration. And by the time they heard of the Holocaust in 1945, there was a strong Zionist movement on the land of Palestine who used the Holocaust to justify Israel's existence. Okay? They succeeded for many reasons. But what's very important is to push back at every attempt to argue that the Jewish people and Israel and Zionism are one and the same. They're not. Israel is a state. Zionism is a colonial project that created the state of Israel. Many Israelis are Zionists, some are not Zionists, which is to come to the point of Ali. Those can live with everybody else, but not settlers, people who want to live on this land as equal to everybody else. And there's the Jewish people who existed before the state of Israel, irrespective of the state of Israel. And this is something that the founder of the Hebrew University, Yehuda Magna, said it. The Jewish people don't need a state to exist, okay? They existed before the state or after the state. So I think in any attack of anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism being anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism is wrong, is a problem of the West. The West created the problem of anti-Semitism and made the Palestinian pay the price for it. We are now, whether we like it or not, forced into this conversation. And we can take it out by clearly specifying anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and we have to say, and Israel does not represent the Jewish people. And what happened on October 7th has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, it has to do with occupation and settler colonialism. So long as we distinguish between Zionists, Israelis, and Jews, that's the way how we prevent Israel from conflating the three of them and criminalizing anybody who tries to separate between them. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you. You did. You know, I just want to say that Israel is a criminal, gangster, sadistic, fascist state. That's it. I mean, it does really, that tells exactly what it is. And I think for those, I mean, I read a lot, I see a lot and so on. Everybody talks about the day after, as if Hamas will say, of course, they're talking about armed resistance, that armed resistance will cease to exist. Well, I think they will be there. They will be strongly there. They will prevail, and they will go on forward. I have a couple of questions from the audience. As somebody asked, well, you answered the one on Zionism and anti-Semitism and so on. But I have a couple of questions that, you know, maybe I could lump them together because we're running a little bit out of time. Can the panel direct us to a document that pulls all this history together, one that outlines the ethnic cleansing that has happened since 1948, and that this has been Israel's plan all along? So I think that Alan Pepe probably talked about some documents. Ali probably has plenty of these things.
I think the electronic intifada and the you know, and Jadaliya have a lot on that because
Right.
so yeah, you will find that and Ilan Pepe's work, of course.
Yeah, and I think the electronic intifada probably has a lot of links. Ali, you have
Yeah. What I just wanted to add is that in the present context, I mean, I wanted to add to Leila's point that in the present context, we're seeing a genocide in Gaza, witnessing a genocide in Gaza of Palestinians. And so Israel and its lobby and its enablers and its accomplices, including the United States government, especially the first and foremost the United States government, are doubling down on this idea that Jews, first of all, Israel equals Jews, and Jews are always victims. Jews are never not victims. And therefore, any criticism of Israel, even when it's committing genocide, is anti-Semitism. And we're witnessing now a massive attack on students in this country, on every college campus, at Columbia, on professors, on your keynote speaker from last year, Professor Joseph Mesad, is facing an unprecedented hate campaign in national media for simply speaking the truth about what's happening. Student groups are being suspended, Students for Justice in Palestine, and students are being warned that if they protest on campus, that they will suffer disciplinary consequences in a time of genocide. And these are the same universities and the same institutions that keep telling us we have to learn the lessons of history, never again. And one of the lessons is you speak out. I mean, that famous phrase from Dietrich Bonhoeffer that became a cliche that, you know, first they came for the communists and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the, you know, until they came for me and nobody was left. I don't remember the exact quote. This is the lesson we're told. This is what good people do in times like this. And now we're being told that good people stay quiet. Good people follow orders. Good people don't rock the boat. Good people don't say mean things about Israel. So it's important for us to fight. And also they're telling this lie of a wave of anti-Semitism. There is no wave of anti-Semitism. There may be anti-Semitic incidents here and there, which we of course condemn because we condemn all forms of racism. But the claim that there is a wave of anti-Semitism is a lie fabricated by Israel and its lobby to deflect criticism and horror and protest at their genocide. And this lie is not just being spread by the Israel lobby, but also by the United States government and the European governments and others who keep threatening universities, you must crack down on anti-Semitism. What they mean by crack down on anti-Semitism is crack down on people of conscience speaking out against the systematic murder of Palestinians, not just with American bombs fragmenting into shrapnel and destroying bodies, but through deliberate starvation, deliberate dehydration, attacks on hospitals. Now Al-Shifa hospital is under attack, and this is all being done with the full support of the United States government, and people are being threatened and fired and disciplined for speaking out. My goodness, where are all these lessons of history of the Holocaust? And yesterday, the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, was visiting a Holocaust memorial and crying never again. Yesterday, because it was the anniversary of Kristallnacht. They go and they cry at Holocaust memorials, never again, never again, while they are supporting a Holocaust in real time. This should make our blood boil. This should make us enraged, and it should increase our determination to go to the streets, to go protest. And I want to point out that there are protests all over the country, and all over the world, but you don't see it from the presidents of universities or from members of Congress, except for a tiny handful of people. You don't see it from CEOs. You don't see it from the journalists at the New York Times. You see it from high school students, from college students, from the Postal Workers Union, from indigenous people, from people of color. These are the people who understand what Israel and the United States government are doing to us. And so I just want to take this platform, like all platforms, to say, speak out. Don't be intimidated by their lies and their accusations of anti-Semitism. Now is the time to speak out in every place. This is a genocide. I'm sorry, I'm just...
No, we're with you. We're with you 100%. And I can tell you, I teach a course at American University, and I talk to students all the time. Students know. They are aware. It's amazing. I'm surprised. I mean, 20-year-old, they know exactly what's going on. They know exactly what's going on.
And
you go to the demonstrations that I covered last Saturday, you know, close to 300,000 people were out there. I mean, it's amazing. So people are aware, you know. It's just, you know, this, like you said, I mean, it's a, you know, it's used as and something or euphemism so you can suppress Palestinian activism and right. I have a couple more questions. We have 5 minutes, but let me go and pick from here. It says, how someone is asking how I address these liberal Zionists that come to me and addressing the years of occupation, and instead not addressing years of occupation, and instead only focus on Gaza as a humanitarian issue, which is I think something that Leila touched upon, you know. If you want to go ahead and...
Well, that's the problem of the colonizer. They don't want to see history. They don't want to see context. They want to start with, as Ali explained, you know, they want to start that they are the eternal victims. And I think what you do with that is emphasize the humanity of everybody, you know. They're not more victims. Some people are not more victims than others. I mean, come on, for heaven's sake, guys. We had 120,000 people expelled from their home in Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenian, who were expelled from their home. 120,000 just happened a month ago. Nobody talked about it. This is as wrong as everything else, you know. So I think how to address liberal Zionism is that you need to look yourself in the mirror. Everybody has a right to live in freedom and equality and peace and security. No one has a right over another in that respect. Nobody has a right to demonize somebody else. And that's, it's like, yeah, I understand you want to live in peace and security, but the only way you can live in peace or security is with your neighbor and with whoever is around you. So I think that's you just say Israel has you don't want to go to 48, don't go to 48. Don't want to go to 67, don't go to 67. Go to 17 years of siege. Okay. This is always emblematic of a structural problem that Israel has, which is the problem of every settler state. Settler state survives. The only way it can survive is on negation and on victim. It's not new. The white South African did it before Israel. The Native the American, the Pilgrims did it on the expense of the Native American. It's always the argument that the peoples are being victims of savages, and that's what we need to combat. We are human beings like everybody else. Gazans have a right to life like everybody else. Zionism is the one that is the most unsafe place for the Jewish people because it is built on the negation of the original people of the land. It's not it's a project of extinction. It's not a project of inclusion. The Palestinian project is a project of inclusion. We include everybody in equality. Israel is based on exclusion and victimhood. And this cannot work in the 21st century. They're trying. That's true. They're going to continue to push. But the answer to liberal Zionism is you're liberal, you want to live, you have a right to live. The essence of liberalism, even if we like it or we don't like it, that everybody has equal rights. Everybody has a right to life. So let's emphasize that. Everybody has equal right to life. And I think that's how we go. But of course, the struggle is going to be long. And that's what I'm saying. The attack on us is going to become louder. The push is going to be stronger. And we have to resist it by speaking truth to power and remembering our values, which are inclusive, human, emphasizing humanity and the equality of our rights that are protected by international law. We have the law and the moral argument on our side. And we need to put the capital to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ali, very much. I mean, thank you, Leila. Really uplifting, inspiring, and reassuring. I mean, this is the kind of conversation that all Palestinians should be having right now. Just focus on the heroism